Something older. Tomorrow, it said, and for a brief moment a shadow in the corner shifted, as if something had been waiting all along. The next morning arrived too quickly. Neither Mr. nor Mrs. Rahman had slept much. Every small sound during the night had felt louder than usual. The creak of the floorboards, the whisper of the wind outside, even the faint ticking of the clock. And through it all, one thought kept returning again and again: the backyard. When the first light of dawn slipped through the curtains, Mrs. Rahman was already awake. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands tightly clasped, staring at the floor. "We shouldn't do this," she said quietly. Mr. Rahman, standing near the window, didn't turn around. "We need to know," he replied. "Know what? That something is wrong here. We already know that." He finally looked at her. His face was tired but determined. "If we don't check, this will only get worse," he said. "It's probably nothing. Maybe an old storage box or something left behind by the previous owners." Mrs. Rahman shook her head. "And what if it's not?" He didn't answer because he didn't have an answer. After a moment of silence, he grabbed his jacket. "I'll go alone," he said. "You stay with Aina." Mrs. Rahman hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Be careful," she whispered. The backyard looked different in the daylight, less frightening but not entirely normal. The tall grass swayed gently in the morning breeze. Sunlight filtered through the branches of the large tree, casting long shadows across the ground. Birds chirped faintly in the distance, but even their sounds felt distant. Mr. Rahman stepped outside, holding a shovel. For a moment he just stood there, looking, listening, trying to convince himself that everything was fine. "This is stupid," he muttered under his breath. "I'm digging because of a story a child told me." Still, his feet began to move. He walked toward the large tree, the same tree Aina had pointed to. As he got closer, something caught his attention. A patch of soil, slightly darker than the rest. Uneven, disturbed, he stopped. His grip on the shovel tightened. "That's not normal," he whispered. He stepped closer and nudged the ground with his foot. The soil felt loose, recently moved. His heart began to beat faster. Slowly, he pushed the shovel into the dirt. The sound of metal cutting through soil echoed softly in the quiet morning. One scoop, then another and another. At first, nothing seemed unusual, just dirt, rocks, roots, but then thunk. The shovel hit something hard. Mr. Rahman froze. He looked down. His breath became shallow. Slowly, carefully, he knelt and brushed away some of the dirt with his hands. What he saw made his stomach tighten. Wood, a flat surface, smooth but old. He cleared more soil and more, until the shape became clear. It wasn't just a piece of wood, it was a small door buried beneath the ground. His hands began to shake. "This can't be real," he whispered. He stood up quickly and backed away. For a moment he considered stopping, pretending he had found nothing, but then Aina's voice echoed in his mind, the one under the tree. He turned and ran back toward the house. Inside, Mrs. Rahman was pacing anxiously. When the door opened, she rushed toward him. "What happened?" she asked. He didn't speak at first. He just looked at her, and in his eyes she saw the answer. "There's something there," he said finally. Her face went pale. "No," she whispered. He nodded slowly. "You need to see this." "I don't want to," she replied immediately. But even as she said it, she knew she had no choice. They both turned toward Aina. She was standing in the hallway, watching them, silent. "How long have you been there?" Mrs. Rahman asked, startled. Aina didn't answer. Instead, she walked toward them calmly. "Did you find it?" she asked. Her voice was soft but certain. Mr. Rahman hesitated, then nodded. Aina's lips curved into a faint smile. "He told me you would," she said. A chill ran down Mrs. Rahman's spine. "No," she said firmly, stepping in front of her daughter. "You're not going outside." But Aina gently moved past her. "He's waiting," she said, and before either of them could stop her, she walked toward the door. The three of them stood in the backyard. The air felt heavier now, colder. The patch of disturbed soil lay open, revealing the wooden door beneath. Mrs. Rahman gasped softly. "Oh my God!" The door was small, no bigger than a child's height. Its surface was worn and discolored, with cracks running along the edges. In the center was a rusted metal lock. Mr. Rahman swallowed hard. "That's it," he said. "We're calling the police." But Aina stepped forward. Her eyes were fixed on the door. "He's been alone for a long time," she said quietly. "Mrs." Rahman grabbed her arm. "Aina, stop." But Aina didn't resist. She simply raised her other hand, and in it was the key, the same rusted key from the photograph. Mrs. Rahman stared at it in shock. "You didn't have that before," she said. Aina didn't respond. She just looked at the lock, as if drawn to it. "No," Mr. Rahman said firmly. "We are not opening that." But Aina took another step forward. "He said it's the only way," she whispered. Her voice sounded different, colder, almost distant. "Mrs. Rahman's grip tightened. "Listen to me, we don't know what's inside." Aina slowly turned her head toward her. For a moment her expression changed, not like a child's, something else, something older. "He's scared," she said. Those 3 words broke something inside Mrs. Rahman. Her grip loosened, and in that brief moment Aina pulled away. She stepped in front of the buried door. The key in her hand glinted faintly in the sunlight. Mr. Rahman rushed forward. "Aina, don't." But it was too late. She knelt down, inserted the key into the rusted lock, and paused. For a single second, everything went silent. The wind stopped. The birds stopped. Even the air felt still, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Then she turned the key. Click. The sound echoed louder than it should have. The lock released. Slowly, painfully, the wooden door creaked open. A dark, cold smell rose from below. Something old, something hidden. Mr. Rahman grabbed Aina and pulled her back. "What have you done?" he said, his voice shaking. But Aina didn't respond. She was staring into the darkness, and then she whispered, "He's not alone." For a moment no one moved. The wooden door hung open, revealing a narrow, dark space beneath the ground. The smell rising from it was heavy, damp, old, and deeply unsettling, like something that had been hidden for far too long. Mr. Rahman held Aina tightly, pulling her a few steps back. "What have you done?" he whispered, his voice trembling. But Aina didn't answer. Her eyes remained fixed on the open hole, her expression calm, almost distant. "He's not alone," she repeated softly. A cold chill spread through Mrs. Rahman's body. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Aina didn't respond this time. She simply kept staring into the darkness. Mr. Rahman swallowed hard and stepped forward slowly. Every instinct in his body told him to stop, to close the door, to walk away, to pretend none of this had happened. But he couldn't, not anymore. He leaned closer and peered into the hole. At first he saw nothing, just darkness. Then, with shaking hands, he reached for his phone and turned on the flashlight. A narrow beam of light cut through the blackness, and what it revealed made his breath stop. There were bones, small bones, scattered at first glance, but then clearly forming a shape. A skeleton, a child's skeleton, curled slightly to one side as if it had been placed or trapped in that confined space. The remains were wrapped in what looked like old, decayed fabric. Torn pieces of clothing clung to the bones, barely holding together after years underground. Mr. Rahman stumbled backward. "No," he whispered. Mrs. Rahman rushed forward. "What is it? What do you see?" He couldn't answer. His face had gone pale. His hands were shaking uncontrollably. Against her fear, Mrs. Rahman stepped closer and looked inside. The moment her eyes adjusted to the light, a scream escaped her lips. She covered her mouth, stumbling back in horror. "Oh my God, oh my God." Aina stood still, watching, not afraid, not shocked, just quiet. "He told me," she said softly. "He said he couldn't breathe." Mrs. Rahman turned toward her, tears in her eyes. "Stop it, Aina, stop saying these things." But Aina didn't react. It was as if she wasn't fully there anymore. Mr. Rahman quickly pulled out his phone again, this time dialing the police with trembling fingers. His voice cracked as he spoke. There's something buried in our backyard. A child, I think it's a child." The police arrived within the hour. The peaceful silence of the house was shattered by flashing lights, hushed conversations, and the sound of footsteps moving quickly across the yard. Officers surrounded the area, carefully examining the open door and the remains below. Forensic teams were called in. Photographs were taken, evidence was collected, the Rahman family was asked to step inside. Mrs. Rahman sat on the couch, still shaken, her hands wrapped tightly around each other. Mr. Rahman stood near the window, watching everything unfold outside. Aina sat quietly between them. Unusually calm, an officer approached them. "We're going to need some information," he said gently. "Can you tell me how you found this?" Mr. Rahman hesitated. How could he explain it? That his daughter had been talking to someone no one else could see. That she had been led to a buried door. "It was an accident," he said finally. "We noticed disturbed soil and decided to check." The officer nodded, though his expression suggested he wasn't fully convinced. "We'll investigate everything," he said. "But for now, you should stay inside." Hours passed. By evening, the truth began to unfold. One of the officers returned, his face serious. "We found records," he said, "from years ago. A young boy went missing in this area." Mrs. Rahman looked up slowly. "How old?" she asked. "6. The officer replied, "The same age as Aina. He lived in this house with his family." The officer continued. "One day, he disappeared. No witnesses, no evidence. The case went cold." Mr. Rahman felt a heavy weight settle in his chest. "And now," he asked. The officer glanced toward the backyard. "We believe we've found him." Silence filled the room. Mrs. Rahman closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. "But that's not all," the officer added. Both of them looked up. There were signs. He hesitated, choosing his words carefully, "that the child may not have been alone when he died." A cold fear gripped the room. "What do you mean?" Mr. Rahman asked. The officer shook his head slightly. "We're still investigating." That night, the house felt different. Heavier, darker, as if something had changed. The police had left, but their presence still lingered in the air. The backyard was sealed off, marked as a crime scene. Mrs. Rahman sat in the living room again, staring at nothing. "I want to leave," she said quietly. "We will," Mr. Rahman replied, "tomorrow." But Aina was nowhere to be seen. Panic rose instantly. "Aina!" Mrs. Rahman called out. No answer. They searched the house quickly, their fear growing with each passing second. Then they found her, standing in front of the family portrait, the same photo from that morning. She was staring at it. Unmoving. "Aina," her father said cautiously. She didn't turn. "Look," she whispered. They stepped closer. Mrs. Rahman picked up the photo with shaking hands. At first it looked the same, but then she saw it. Behind Aina, in the shadow near the corner of the room, a faint figure, a child standing still, watching. His face was unclear, but his presence was undeniable. Mrs. Rahman gasped. "That wasn't there before," she said, her voice breaking. Mr. Rahman stared at the image, unable to speak, and then they noticed something else, Aina's hand. In the photo, it was still raised, but the key was gone. Slowly, they looked down at Aina. Her hand was raised in the same position. Empty, but her fingers were slightly curled, as if she was still holding something. Something invisible. Something that hadn't left. Aina finally turned toward them and smiled. A soft, quiet smile. "He's not lost anymore," she said. The room fell silent, but deep within that silence, something still remained, watching, waiting, and perhaps no longer trapped. They thought it was just a normal family photo until they zoomed in and saw what their daughter was holding. The Rahman family looked like the kind of family people admired from a distance. They were quiet, polite, and kept to themselves. Mr. Rahman worked as an accountant in the city, leaving early each morning and returning just before sunset. Mrs. Rahman spent most of her time at home, taking care of their daughter and managing the house. And then there was Aina, their 6-year-old child, small for her age, with soft brown eyes and a calmness that often felt unusual for someone so young. They had recently moved into a new home on the edge of town. The house itself stood slightly apart from the others, surrounded by tall trees that blocked most of the noise from the outside world. It was an old structure, built many years ago, with faded paint and creaky wooden floors. But it had a quiet beauty to it, wide windows that let in warm sunlight, high ceilings, and a backyard filled with wild grass and a single large tree. When they first arrived, the neighbors had been curious. Some came to greet them politely, offering smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. Others simply watched from a distance. One elderly woman who lived across the street had said something strange on their first day. "You'll find it peaceful here," she had said slowly, very quiet. At the time, Mrs. Rahman had smiled and thanked her. But later that night, as she stood in the silent hallway of the house, she understood what the woman meant. The silence wasn't normal, it was heavy, almost as if the house was holding its breath. Still, they chose to ignore it. They told themselves it was just because the house was new to them. Every old place made sounds. Every unfamiliar space felt strange at first. With time, they believed it would begin to feel like home, but Aina reacted differently. From the very first night, she seemed comfortable. Too comfortable. While her parents spent days unpacking and organizing, Aina wandered through the house quietly, as if she already knew where everything was. She rarely asked questions, rarely complained. Sometimes they would find her sitting alone in a corner, staring at something that wasn't there. "Aina, what are you looking at?" her mother would ask. "Nothing." She would reply softly, and then she would smile, the small, distant smile that didn't quite match her age. A week passed, then another. Slowly, life settled into a routine. Mr. Rahman went to work. Mrs. Rahman cleaned, cooked, and tried to make the house feel warmer. Aina spent most of her time playing quietly, often in the backyard near the large tree. It was during one of those afternoons that Mrs. Rahman noticed something unusual. Aina was kneeling on the ground, her hands covered in dirt. "What are you doing?" her mother called out. Aina looked up calmly. "Just playing," she said, but there was something about the way she said it, something that made Mrs. Rahman pause for a moment longer than usual. Still, she didn't question it further. Children played. Children dug in the dirt. It was normal, or at least that's what she told herself. By the end of the month, Mr. Rahman suggested they take a family photograph. "We should capture this moment," he said one evening. "Our new home, a new beginning." Mrs. Rahman agreed immediately. It felt like a good idea, something positive, something happy. A way to mark the start of their life in this house. They decided to take the photo on Sunday morning. The sun was bright that day, casting a soft golden light through the living room windows. Mrs. Rahman cleaned the space carefully, adjusting the curtains so the light would fall perfectly behind them. She wanted everything to look just right. Mr. Rahman set up the camera on a tripod. "Stand here," he said, guiding his wife into position. "Aina, come here." Aina walked in slowly. She was wearing a simple white dress, her hair neatly tied back. She looked calm, almost too calm, as she took her place in front of her parents. "Okay," Mr. Rahman said, adjusting the timer. "Everyone smile." Mrs. Rahman placed her hand gently on Aina's shoulder. "Smile, Aina," she said softly. But Aina didn't smile. She stood still. Her eyes were fixed straight ahead, not at the camera, but slightly beyond it, as if she was looking at something far away. For a brief moment the room felt different, colder, quieter. "Come on, Aina," her father said with a small laugh. "Just one smile." That's when Aina slowly raised her right hand. At first, neither of them paid attention. They assumed she was just moving or adjusting her posture, but her movement was slow, deliberate. Her fingers were tightly wrapped around something small. Something dark. The camera timer beeped. 3 seconds, 2, 1, click. The photo was taken. Aina's hand remained raised. And whatever she was holding stayed hidden within her small, dirt-covered fingers. At that moment, no one noticed. No one asked. No one thought twice about it, because to them, it was just a simple family portrait. A quiet moment, a happy memory. They didn't yet know that this picture would soon become the beginning of something they could never escape. That night, the house felt quieter than usual. Dinner had been simple. Conversation had been light. Mr. Rahman spoke about work. Mrs. Rahman nodded and smiled, and Aina sat silently, eating slowly, her eyes occasionally drifting toward the hallway. Nothing seemed wrong, and yet something didn't feel right. After dinner, Aina went to her room without being told. She didn't ask for a story, didn't ask for water, things she usually did. She simply walked away, her small footsteps fading into the distance. Mrs. Rahman watched her go. "She's been quiet today," she said softly. Mr. Rahman shrugged. "She's always quiet." "Yes, but today feels different." He didn't respond. Instead, he turned on the television, trying to relax. But even he couldn't fully ignore the strange tension in the air. Later that night, when the house had settled into silence, Mrs. Rahman sat alone in the living room with her phone. She opened the gallery. The family portrait from that morning was there, along with a few other pictures they had taken, different angles, different poses. She smiled as she scrolled through them. They looked happy, normal, like any other family starting a new chapter. But then she reached the last photo, the one taken just before they stopped. Her smile faded. Something about it felt off. She leaned closer to the screen. At first, she couldn't understand what was bothering her. The lighting was perfect. Their positions were natural. Everything seemed fine. Then her eyes moved to Aina and she froze. Aina's hand was raised. Mrs. Rahman frowned slightly. "Why didn't I notice that before?" she whispered to herself. She zoomed in. The image blurred for a moment, then sharpened. There in Aina's small hand was something dark, something metallic. Her heartbeat began to quicken. She zoomed in further. Now she could see it clearly. It was a key, a small, rusted key. The surface looked rough, uneven, as if it had been buried in dirt for a long time. There were dark patches along its edges, and the metal had a dull, aged color that didn't match anything inside their home. Mrs. Rahman's fingers trembled slightly. "Where did she get that?" she whispered. Her mind began to race. They hadn't given her any key. There were no old objects like that in the house, at least none that they had found so far. Everything they had brought with them was new, clean, familiar. This key didn't belong to them. A strange feeling settled deep in her chest. She stood up quickly and walked toward the bedroom. "Listen," she said, her voice tense. Mr. Rahman looked up. "What happened? Look at this." She handed him the phone. He studied the image carefully, his expression shifting from confusion to concern. "What is that?" he asked. "It's a key," she replied. Aina was holding it. He frowned. "That's not possible. I didn't give her anything. Neither did I." They both went silent. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The room seemed to grow colder, the air heavier. "Maybe she picked it up somewhere," he said finally, though his voice lacked confidence. "Where?" Mrs. Rahman asked. "We were all together this morning." He didn't have an answer. Without another word, they both turned toward the hallway. Aina's room was at the end. The door was slightly open. A faint light spilled out into the darkness. Mrs. Rahman felt her throat tighten. "Let's just ask her," Mr. Rahman said, trying to sound calm. But as they took a few steps closer, they both stopped. Aina was speaking. Her voice was soft, almost like a whisper. At first, the words were unclear. Then slowly they became understandable. "I found it," she said. There was a pause, a long pause. Mrs. Rahman looked at her husband, her eyes wide with fear. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. He nodded. Aina spoke again. "Yes, I know," she said quietly. "I didn't tell them." Another pause. This time it felt longer, heavier, as if she was listening to someone else speak. Mrs. Rahman's heart began to pound loudly in her chest. "Who is she talking to?" she asked under her breath. Mr. Rahman didn't reply. He slowly stepped forward and pushed the door open. The hinges creaked softly. Inside, Aina was sitting on the floor near her bed. Her back was turned to them. The room was dimly lit by a small lamp, and she was alone, completely alone. "Aina," her father said gently. "She didn't move, Aina," he repeated. Slowly, she turned her head. Her face was calm, too calm. "Who are you talking to?" he asked. She blinked once, then she pointed toward the empty corner of the room. "To him," she said. Mrs. Rahman felt a chill run down her spine. "There's no one there," she said, her voice shaking. Aina frowned slightly, as if confused by her mother's words. "Yes, there is," she said simply. Silence filled the room. Mr. Rahman stepped closer. "Aina, where did you get that key?" he asked carefully. For a moment, Aina didn't respond. Then she looked down at her hands. The key wasn't there now, but she didn't seem surprised. "I found it," she said again. "Where?" her mother asked quickly. Aina raised her hand and pointed toward the window. "Outside," she said, "in the ground." Mrs. Rahman's breath caught. "In the backyard?" she asked. Aina nodded. "Where exactly?" her father pressed. Aina turned her gaze toward them once more, and then she said something that made both of them freeze. "He showed me." A long silence followed. "Who showed you?" Mrs. Rahman whispered. Aina's eyes shifted slowly back toward the empty corner. "The boy," she said. The room felt colder than ever. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them moved. Because, deep down, without saying it aloud, they both felt the same terrifying thought forming in their minds. What if Aina hadn't found the key on her own? And what if she wasn't alone in this house after all? That night, no one in the Rahman house slept peacefully. After the conversation in Aina's room, an uneasy silence settled over everything. Mr. and Mrs. Rahman didn't speak much. They tucked Aina into bed, turned off her light, and quietly stepped out. But neither of them truly believed she was alone in that room. Mrs. Rahman kept glancing back at the door. "Maybe she's just imagining things," she whispered, more to comfort herself than anything else. Mr. Rahman nodded, but his face showed doubt. "Kids make up stories," he said. "It's normal." But even as he said it, he couldn't ignore the details. The key, the way Aina spoke, the pauses as if she was listening, none of it felt normal. Hours passed. The house fell into complete silence. Outside, the wind moved softly through the trees, brushing against the windows. The faint ticking of the wall clock echoed through the living room. Mrs. Rahman sat on the couch, unable to relax. "I don't like this," she said quietly. Mr. Rahman sighed. "You're overthinking." "No," she replied firmly. "Something is wrong," she said. A boy showed her the key. "What boy?" He didn't answer, because he didn't know. And deep down, he didn't want to know. Just then, a sound broke the silence, a faint voice. They both froze. It was coming from the hallway, from Aina's room. Mrs. Rahman slowly stood up, her heart beating faster with each step. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. Mr. Rahman nodded. The voice was clearer now. It was Aina, soft, calm, but not alone. "I kept it safe," she was saying. Pause. "Yes, they saw it." Another pause, longer this time. Mrs. Rahman's hands began to shake. "She's talking again," she whispered. Mr. Rahman motioned for her to stay quiet. They moved closer to the door, careful not to make a sound. The door was slightly open, just like before. A thin line of light stretched across the floor. They stood there, listening. "I didn't tell them everything," Aina continued. Silence. "Then I promised I'll help you." Mrs. Rahman felt her breath catch in her throat. "Help who? And with what?" Her mind raced with questions, each one more frightening than the last. She leaned closer to the door, trying to hear more. Suddenly, Aina's voice dropped even lower. "I'll open it tomorrow," she whispered. A cold wave of fear washed over Mrs. Rahman. "Open what?" Before she could think further, Mr. Rahman gently pushed the door open. The hinges creaked softly. The room fell silent. Aina was sitting on the floor again. Her back was facing them, the same position as before. "The same stillness, Aina," her father said, trying to keep his voice steady. Slowly, she turned around. Her expression was calm, almost blank. "Why are you awake?" he asked. "I wasn't sleeping," she replied. Mrs. Rahman stepped forward. "Who were you talking to?" Aina blinked. Then she looked to the side, toward the same empty corner. "To him," she said quietly. The room felt heavier. "There's no one there," Mrs. Rahman said, her voice trembling. Aina's brows furrowed slightly. "Yes, there is," she insisted. Mr. Rahman glanced at the corner. Nothing. "Just shadows." He forced a small smile. "Aina, listen, there's no boy here. You're imagining things." Aina shook her head slowly. "No," she said, "he's real." A long silence followed. Mrs. Rahman knelt down in front of her daughter. "Sweetheart, what does he look like?" she asked gently. For a moment, Aina didn't respond. Then she spoke. "He's small," she said, "like me." Mrs. Rahman swallowed hard. He's dirty, Aina continued. His clothes are torn, Mr. Rahman felt a chill run down his spine, and, he asked quietly. Aina's eyes shifted again toward the corner. He's sad, she said. Silence filled the room once more. Mrs. Rahman hesitated before asking the next question. What does he want? Aina looked back at her. To go home, she said. The words hung in the air, heavy. Unsettling. Mr. Rahman took a step closer. Aina, where is his home? He asked. Aina raised her hand slowly and pointed, not outside, not toward the door, but downward, toward the floor. Mrs. Rahman's breath caught. He's stuck, Aina whispered, in the ground. A deep, terrifying silence followed. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them moved, because in that moment, something shifted. This was no longer just a child's imagination. There was a pattern, the key, the backyard, the whispering. It was all connected. Aina, her father said carefully, what did he tell you about the key? Aina looked down at her empty hands. Then back at him. He said it opens the door, she replied. What door? Mrs. Rahman asked quickly. Aina didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned her head once more toward the empty corner, as if waiting, listening. Then she spoke, the one under the tree. The words sent a wave of fear through both of them. Mrs. Rahman stood up quickly. No, she said firmly, that's enough. This is not real. You're not going outside tomorrow. Do you understand? Aina didn't argue. She didn't cry. She didn't even react. She simply nodded. Okay, she said softly, but there was something strange in her tone. Something that didn't feel like obedience. It felt like she already knew something they didn't. Mr. Rahman gently guided her back to bed. Go to sleep, he said. This time she lay down without resistance. They turned off the light and stepped out of the room, closing the door behind them. The hallway was silent again. But the silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt watched. Mrs. Rahman grabbed her husband's arm. We need to leave this house, she whispered urgently. He hesitated. Let's not rush, she said. There's something in the ground. She interrupted. A boy, a door. This isn't normal. He ran a hand through his hair, clearly shaken. We'll check the backyard tomorrow, he said finally, just to be sure. Mrs. Rahman stared at him. Promise me, she said, her voice breaking slightly. You won't let her go near that tree. He nodded. I promise. But as they stood there in the dim hallway, neither of them noticed something. Inside Aina's room in the darkness, a faint whisper echoed. Not Aina's voice, something softer.